Hi everyone, welcome back to High School Science 101. And lately I've been watching a lot of makers videos on YouTube that have been trying to make submarines. A lot of them have used Lego Mindstorms and Technic and various other robotics. And it's got me thinking, can you make a submarine prototype that doesn't use any electrical engineering whatsoever and also doesn't break the bank? Something that's very affordable, maybe only about $30 or $40. We're going to try and answer both of those questions today. Let's get started. Okay, so this is our container here. This is going to be the shell for our submarine. I've got another container, a cylindrical one, and I'm not sure if that's going to work better or not, but we're going to start off with our rectangular one here. And this is meant to be an airtight container. Hopefully it is. And it's got a gasket here that ensures an airtight seal. So this will be the shell for our submarine. There are two main factors that we need to think about with this submarine. One is we need some sort of way of making it rise and sink. Secondly, we need some way of making it steer and go forwards, so some sort of thrust mechanism. Starting with the first aspect, making it rise and sink, we can either find some sort of way of adding air into it to make it float, or removing air to make it sink, or we can have some sort of way of adding and removing ballast. So we can add some weight into it to make it sink, or remove that weight to make it float. I'm thinking we'll go down that second option. What we could do is have a container sitting inside our submarine, and we can have I've got some rubber tubing here. We can attach some tubing to this container, and the other tube could be connected to a syringe full of water outside of the tank. And so by injecting water into this container, that's adding weight to our submarine, which would make it sink. And likewise, to make it float, I could suck out some of that water through this syringe, and water would be removed from this, and that would make the submarine float. So the water inside this container would be our ballast, making it rise and sink. That's the plan anyway. So according to the plan so far, we're going to have a pipe coming out the top of our submarine, and one end of that pipe will be connected to a container sitting inside the submarine where we can add and remove water, thereby adding and removing weight to make it rise and sink. So we've got some idea of making it rise and sink. The second thing we need to think about is how we're going to make it go forwards, left, and right. What I'm thinking is we could add in two more pipes, and they could come out the left and right side of the rear of the submarine. The other ends of those pipes could be connected to syringes, and these could be filled with air or water. We have to do some tests to tell which propellant will be better. But essentially, if I squeeze the left syringe, that'll push air or water out the left pipe at the back here and make it go to the right. Likewise, if I squeeze the right syringe, that'll force water or air outside of the right pipe, making it go to the left. And to make it go forwards in a straight line, we'll squeeze both at the same time, forcing air or water outside both jets, making it go forwards. And essentially this is a form of skid steering, which is how tanks steer. This is the plan so far. We have to do a few tests and a few experiments to determine whether air or water would be better. But this is the plan. We'll probably make some changes along the way. We'll see how we go. All right, so I've just done a very basic test with the tank just then, and I've noticed a few things. Firstly, this isn't an airtight seal, and that's fine. I've got some hot glue and we can make a bit of a seal around there. Secondly, the weight isn't evenly distributed inside this submarine. And again, that's very easily fixed. We can fix that with some weight internally. But thirdly, and most importantly, what happened was I filled this internal tank full of water, but that still wasn't enough weight to make the submarine sink. So what we need to do is add some weight to the submarine so that it essentially becomes the same density as water, which is 1 gram per centimeter cubed. If we can get this to 1 gram per centimeter cubed, the same density as water, essentially what that means is I can submerge this in the tank, about halfway in the tank, and let go, and it should stay where it is. It shouldn't rise or float too much on its own. So then, hopefully, it would just be a matter of adding and removing the small amounts of water in that internal tank to make it rise and sink. Hopefully. We'll see how we go. Alright, so we want the density of our submarine to be as close to 1 gram per centimeter cubed as possible, which is the same density as water. If we can get it down to as close to this density as possible, then when we submerge the submarine in the tank, it'll just sit there. It'll sit wherever we put it. It won't float or sink on its own. It'll stay where it is, in the neutral position. And then it'll rise and sink based on how much water we're transferring into that internal tank. So what we need to do first is, because density is grams per centimeter cubed. Centimeter cubed is a measure of volume. So let's first work out the volume of our submarine, and then we can work out how heavy it needs to be in order to achieve this density. So let's start with our length, because volume is length times width times height. So its length is 12.5 centimeters. 12.5. Now we need to find out its width. And it is 7.7 centimeters. And now its height is 6 centimeters. And we multiply these together, and that'll give us the volume in centimeters cubed for our submarine. So let's calculate that now. 12.5 times 7.7 equals times 6 equals 577.5 centimeters cubed. So that's the volume of our submarine shell. Now, in order to achieve 1 gram per centimeter cubed, basically, the weight of our submarine needs to be 577.5 grams. So we are going to now add weight inside this shell using some lead weights in order to try and achieve a weight of 577.5 grams, and that will give us a nice neutral density, which is the same as water. I went to the local fishing shop and I bought a bag of these lead sinkers, which are perfect for this sort of thing, because initially I was going to use batteries as my weight, but the submarine can only hold 2 of these D-sized batteries, and that still wasn't enough weight to achieve that sort of density that we need. So these lead sinkers are perfect, not only because they're super dense and also quite small, but also because I can move them around and adjust the balance of the submarine once it's in the water. So we needed 577.5 grams in order for this to be the same density as water. So let's put the lid on and weigh it and see what we're up to. So 581, that's very close. I've also got some water already inside that internal tank. So 581, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go outside and test it out. I'm really happy with that test. Basically what we've done is we've developed a submarine that is the same density as water. So as you saw, I could put it in the water and it would pretty much just stay there. And we've developed a variable ballast system simply by transferring water into and out of this internal tank, which allows us to make it rise and sink. All right, so now we need to think about thrust. We need to think about how we're going to get it moving in certain directions. I've got a very scientific diagram here, as you can see. We've got our submarine, and this is the direction that we want it to go in. And because we're dealing with nautical vessels, we're going to call the front the bow and the rear the stern. Initially, I was thinking that we could mount 2 thrusters at the back here at the stern. We could have one on the left and one on the right, blasting propellant out. And to make it turn to the right, we could activate the left thruster. And to make it turn to the left, we'd activate the right thruster. And to make it go forwards in a straight line, we would activate both at the same time, pushing it forwards. However, I think going forwards it will be fine. That won't be an issue. But I think steering won't be sensitive enough with this. I've got a feeling if we activate the left one, for example, it won't veer off to the right like it should. I think it's just going to go forwards, more or less. So then I was thinking, well, what happens if you still have them mounted at the rear, but on an angle? And I suspect what will happen here is that we'll get much more responsive turning and handling. I think if we activate this left thruster, for example, it'll push the stern around and give us that turning movement. However, if we activate both at the same time, because they're sort of opposing each other, I don't think it's going to give us enough forwards thrust if we want to go forwards. So I think a solution that might address both of those issues is to maybe have the pipes mounted off the bow. And so maybe a bit more of an angle even. And so it blasts propellant out to the side. And I've got a feeling that the bow mounted thrusters might be a better solution, because activating this left one should push the bow around to the right, and likewise activating the right one should push it around to the left. And I suspect that if we activate both at the same time, that should give us a nice good forwards thrust movement. So I've set this up now according to that last arrangement so that we can do some tests. We've got a thruster here on the left, we've got one on the right, and this is the bow, the front of the submarine. And they'll be controlled using these syringes. And we've also got our ballast control here. This syringe is adjusting the amount of water inside that internal tank to make it rise and sink. Let's go do some tests. At the moment, I've just got the tubing stuck on with sticky tape just so we can move them around and adjust the angles of the thrusters. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to adjust the angles and see if we get any difference in handling and in thrust. So at the moment, to start off with, we've got the thrusters just facing directly towards the back of the submarine, so parallel to the submarine. And we'll see what happens. Okay, that wasn't bad. We were getting some good forward movements when I pressed both syringes at the same time, but we didn't really have much in terms of handling. It didn't turn left or right very well. So now we've created more of an angle for our thrusters. Instead of the water being blasted parallel to the side of the submarine, we've got it angled out a bit more. So I suspect this should give us a bit more handling. Let's find out. As I expected, having the jets angled further outwards did give us a bit more turning, but it really didn't give us any thrust forwards. So now I'm going to try the first idea that I had, where I had the 2 jets mounted at the stern of the submarine, and we'll see what effect this has. That was probably the best one so far. It made the submarine go forwards about 15 to 20 centimeters, which is pretty impressive given that the syringes are only 25mm syringes. We can have 250 or 500mm syringes, which would obviously make the submarine go a lot further. But nonetheless, although it went forwards pretty well, it didn't really steer at all. So the last option that we're going to try now is having the thrusters at the stern again, but having them slightly angled, which may give us more handling. Let's find out. So overall, I would say that the second last one was probably the best arrangement so far because it did give us some significant movement forwards, although it didn't allow us to steer. I am really interested in making it steer though, and I'm curious to see whether these syringes are capable of making this steer left and right. So we've got this arrangement, which although it won't make it go forwards, it would purely examine whether we can make it steer left and right. And so we've got them mounted at the front, at the bow, and pointing directly out the side. So obviously when I activate this one, it'll push water out that way, which should make it turn, should. And if it doesn't, we'll need some bigger syringes, which might be something for a second prototype in another video. What I've also done for this experiment is I've put more slack into these pipes as well, so there isn't any sort of strain or anything pulling it towards one side. It's moving fairly freely at the moment, so this will be the ultimate test of whether we can get it to spin. Hopefully you could see in the video just then that it did want to spin, but the pipes are restricting it. So what we might do is we'll have an arrangement with 4 pipes and syringes. We'll have the 2 at the rear to give it that forwards movement, which we saw worked really well. And we will have this arrangement as well, where we have 2 at the front pointing perpendicular to the submarine to make it spin left and right. And what we'll do is, so that these pipes don't really restrict its movement, we'll gather them up together and they'll come out through the middle. They'll be connected to this center one and come out directly above the submarine, so they shouldn't really restrict it too much. Here is our finished product, our submarine. So we've got our rear thrusters, I've hot glued those pipes in place, and we've got our steering mechanism at the bow here, and I've hot glued that in place as well. We've got one pointing out to the left and one pointing out to the right. We've also got our ballast inside this internal canister, and I've colored that water blue because that's the only line that has water permanently in it. And so if it's colored blue, I know which line the ballast one is, and I can also see bubbles, and I can bleed this line for bubbles if I need to down the track. As you can see, I've bunched up the pipes together just to neaten it up a bit, and I've used cable ties to join them together to make it nice and neat so they don't get tangled. And then they lead to this, which is our control panel. We've got the pipes coiled up because these pipes are about 5 meters long. I don't need them to be 5 meters long at this moment, but you never know, I might want to do a bigger demonstration in a swimming pool or something down the track. So I've got that length there just in case I need it. And then I've got these syringes. I've got the middle one, which is the ballast tank, so that controls how much water is going into and out of that internal tank to make the submarine rise and fall. Either side of that ballast syringe, I've got the thrusters, left and right. I would generally use those both at the same time. And then on the sides here, we've got our sideways facing jets. So our left turning and right turning jets. thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it, because this was a really fun little project to make, and it only cost about $40. So it's certainly something that you could do over the holidays. I haven't done too many of these project type videos before, but if you do like this sort of thing, make sure you leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, consider supporting the channel by subscribing, and I'll see you next time.